My husband's boss assisted in repairing the porch and revealed something more profound. It was an unexpected scene. There I was, in my backyard on a Tuesday afternoon, wielding a pry bar in one hand, while my husband's boss observed my efforts to fix a loose porch board. There I stood, squinting against the bright sun, my cheeks flushed not from the warmth, but from the subtle embarrassment of uncertainty in my actions. I am Karen. At 62 years of age, I have resided in this house for more than 30 years, yet that porch has consistently served as a mere backdrop rather than a focal project. Typically, my husband, Dave, took care of the repair tasks in our home. However, he had been away on a work retreat for 3 days, and I had grown weary of the incessant creaking and groaning of that plank each time I retrieved the laundry. I attempted to manage it on my own. Naturally, that was precisely when Ron arrived. As soon as he emerged from the silver truck, I recognized him immediately. He was broad-shouldered, in his late 50s, and exuded an air of someone who only hurried when absolutely necessary. I had previously encountered him just once at a company dinner the previous year. Ron, the superior of Dave. I had heard she was widowed, child-free, resided just beyond Millersville, accompanied by a golden retriever and a spacious wraparound porch that likely maintained impeccable condition throughout the years. He smiled softly, as if he already regretted interrupting me. I knocked, he mentioned, but thought it prudent to investigate around back upon hearing the hammering. Dave mentioned that you could be present here. I adjusted my posture, becoming acutely conscious of the smudge of dirt on my cheek and the way my blouse fit a bit more snugly due to the exertion. He is currently away from town, I stated. I was merely engaged in a repair effort. He let out a soft chuckle, moving closer and casting his gaze upon the warped board. Would you mind if I take a moment to review this? The manner in which he inquired was noteworthy. It did not make any assumptions. Exercise caution, courteous. He recognized my capabilities, yet understood that I was open to receiving assistance. After a moment of hesitation, I nodded and took a step back. Ron crouched down, his fingers gliding along the edge as he let out a soft whistle. This one proves to be more obstinate than it appears. Would it be all right if I retrieved some tools from my truck? In that moment, he stepped in to offer his assistance. No judgment here. Please refrain from condescending remarks. His movements were fluid and practiced, accompanied by the subtle sound of his tool belt adjusting as he collaborated with me. I supported the new board as he expertly positioned it into place. We engaged in conversation about the small details, the arid summer, and the newly established grocery store that has replaced the former hardware store. Initially, there was nothing profound. However, he inquired about my feelings regarding the tranquility with Dave absent. I refrained from responding immediately. The reality was, it had been more isolating than I had anticipated. Not only this week, but for an extended period of time now. Dave and I were doing well, yet a distance was beginning to emerge. A tranquil, unhurried environment that develops gradually over time, softening rather than shattering its surroundings. I had become accustomed to dining solo, engaging in conversation with the television rather than with a companion seated across from me. "It's tranquil," I finally whispered, softly enough that I couldn't be certain he caught my words. Ron refrained from pushing. He simply nodded, passed me the drill, and remarked, Your hands are steadier than you realize. We continued our efforts. The porch gradually regained its integrity, one board at a time. I experienced a sense of usefulness that I hadn't felt in quite some time. Perhaps it was merely the sunlight or the manner in which his voice resonated in the afternoon. Yet I discovered that I was smiling with greater ease. At one juncture, I inquired, "Do you consistently visit your employees' residences to address issues?" He let out a soft chuckle, particularly upon learning that the wife is handling all the work on her own. That remark shouldn't have caused me to blush, yet it did. I found myself observing his hands, robust and weathered, each movement imbued with a certain tenderness. As our gazes locked following the release of a particularly obstinate screw, a spark of something ignited between us. Not bold, not unsuitable, merely human being, observing. The final board was completed just as the sun began its descent behind the neighbor's oak tree. For the first time in years, the porch felt solid beneath my feet. Ron rose to his feet, cleaned his hands, and surveyed his surroundings as if he had always been a part of that place. I acknowledged that you completed the majority of the work. He shook his head in disapproval. It has been initiated. A moment of silence followed. Not awkward, merely laden with unexpressed thoughts. An unspoken awareness that perhaps we were both shouldering more than we revealed. This afternoon may have encompassed more than just a porch. "I should go," he said, his voice low and respectful. I acknowledged with a nod, yet neither of us made an immediate move. At last, he took a step back. "If you ever require assistance again, with anything," he stated, his gaze unwavering on mine, "you may reach out. It doesn't necessarily need to focus on tools." I observed him depart, the atmosphere heavy with a warmth that persisted well beyond the fading sound of his truck along the road. I lingered on the steps for an extended period, tracing my fingers over the polished new wood, contemplating the curious sensation of my heart feeling both lighter and heavier simultaneously. That evening, amidst the stillness of the home, his voice echoed in my mind. It wasn't the words themselves, but rather the manner in which he expressed them, as if I held significance. I was uncertain about the outcome. I sensed that a transformation had occurred. The following morning, I awoke to sore shoulders and an unfamiliar flutter in my chest that I hadn't experienced in quite some time. I had slumbered longer than my usual routine. It could have been the exertion from yesterday. Yet it seems more probable that my thoughts had become entwined with Ron's voice throughout the night. As I shifted in bed, my mind lingered on the way he gazed at me. Not in a manner that left me feeling vulnerable, but rather acknowledged. I hadn't experienced that sense of being truly seen in quite some time. That afternoon, Dave made a call. Prompt, as always. A brief check-in. "How is the porch?" he inquired, as if preparing himself for unfavorable tidings. I informed him that it had been resolved. Omitted the detail regarding his boss's visit. I'm not entirely certain of the reason. Perhaps I simply preferred not to articulate the experience of being truly heard, supported, and unhurried. Dave mentioned that he would arrive home late on Friday. Then the call concluded as usual with the distracted "love you" already halfway into his next sentence. I gazed at the phone long after the display had faded to darkness. By Thursday, I had nearly persuaded myself that nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. Individuals consistently support one another. It held no deeper significance. However, shortly after noon, Ron's truck arrived once more. As I tended to the plants by the porch, my gaze caught sight of something through the trees. My heart raced, and I felt a twinge of embarrassment as I hastily wiped my hands on my jeans and glanced at my reflection in the sliding door. I was uncertain about my expectations. I truly did not expect him to return. He emerged carrying a paper bag and a compact cooler tucked under his arm. He held up the bag as if it were a peace offering, suggesting that you might appreciate some lunch. "I trust you enjoy chicken salad." I blinked. "You have provided me with sustenance." He smiled broadly. After all the construction, I thought it was the least I could do. I gestured towards the steps of the porch. "Let's proceed then. Let us evaluate the durability of this item thoroughly." We were seated closely, with paper plates resting on our laps. The sunlight streamed through the maple branches overhead, casting gentle shadows upon the wood below. The gentle cadence of our chewing harmonized with the soothing act of sipping sweet tea from mason jars. It seemed straightforward. It seemed appropriate. Eventually, our conversation took a turn towards more serious topics. He shared with me the story of his wife, Marjorie, and how she had succumbed to breast cancer nearly a decade ago. He continued to wear his ring. He remarked that she was the practical one, capable of sewing a button, repairing a mower, and maintaining balanced books. I simply adhered to her guidance. I observed, noting how his gaze softened at the mention of her name. There existed no resentment, only recollection, genuine affection, serene and enduring. He expressed that he missed the conversation the most. Her manner of speaking to me, even when my responses were not as expected. Do you ever find yourself longing for that sort of experience? The question was straightforward, yet it carried significant weight. I gazed out at the yard and inhaled deeply. I longed for the feeling of being someone's top priority. Dave is a commendable individual, yet it is often the case that time creates distance between people. Ron nodded as if he comprehended all too clearly. A brief moment of silence each day is all it requires. Before you realize it, you find yourselves as strangers under the same roof. His tone carried no accusation, only a sense of recognition. Uncertain of what compelled me to express the following, I proceeded nonetheless. "You restored my sense of capability," I remarked. "I understand it was merely a porch repair, yet I had no idea how much I truly needed that experience." He shifted his gaze in my direction, his knee lightly grazing against mine. "You have consistently demonstrated your capability. At times, it merely requires the observation of another." The warmth of his voice enveloped me, reminiscent of sunlight streaming through a long-closed window. A gentle breeze swept through, carrying with it a silence that felt anything but void. It seemed as though we were both contemplating the same idea, even though neither of us vocalized it. After a moment, he rose and gazed out towards the driveway. "I should get going," he said, yet remained still. I also stood, maintaining his gaze for a moment longer than intended. "I appreciate the lunch, thank you." "It was my pleasure, Karen." His voice carries my name. It carried a certain gravity, as if he were on the verge of sharing something significant. However, he simply reached into the cooler and presented me with a small container. Inside, you will find peach cobbler, crafted in the comfort of home. I believed he would appreciate it. He offered a gentle smile before making his way back to his truck. I remained in place, container in hand, observing until he vanished from sight down the road. Upon entering and lifting the lid, the aroma of warm cinnamon and peaches wafted upward, reminiscent of a memory yet to be experienced. On that particular night, I refrained from turning on the television. I settled onto the porch, attuned to the rhythmic chorus of cicadas as the stars gradually emerged, twinkling into existence one after another. The atmosphere was calm, imbued with an indescribable essence. I reflected on Ron's hands, the subtlety with which he listened, the tenderness that emerged in his eyes when they met mine. I found myself contemplating whether a porch could be repaired within the span of an afternoon. Is it possible for a heart? The following day unfolded with a languid pace, as if the house itself was suspended in anticipation. I occupied my time with small tasks, folding laundry, clearing out the junk drawer, and organizing spices that had remained untouched for years. Anything to keep moving, for when I paused, my thoughts turned to Ron. Contemplating Ron evoked a sensation within me that was simultaneously alien and recognizable. It had been years, indeed decades, since I had experienced this level of awareness. The anticipation that stirs within you as you prepare to meet someone. The instinctive way your body leans toward the door, as if it can sense the approach of footsteps yet to be heard. That evening, Dave returned home. He felt weary, burdened by the familiar black duffel and the lingering aroma of hotel air. He brushed his lips against my cheek, a fleeting touch, and set his bag down by the stairs as he always did. "It's a lengthy journey," he murmured. "Shall we discuss this further at a later time?" I acknowledged with a nod. We had become accustomed to this manner of transition, akin to travelers at a station, perpetually in the act of arriving or departing. I prepared dinner for him. He consumed his meal while perusing his emails, nodding at something displayed on the screen, rather than acknowledging me. I held no blame towards him. Not quite. Life has molded us into this, reserved, courteous, and consistent. Yet, a portion of my being, the one that had begun to awaken and expand since Tuesday, experienced a sense of restlessness. The porch remained tranquil that evening. After Dave ascended the stairs, I emerged, draping a cardigan over my shoulders. The floorboards remained silent. They remained firm underfoot. However, my thoughts were not aligned. I settled into my seat and gazed into the darkness, secretly wishing to catch a glimpse of headlights approaching the driveway. The road remained devoid of traffic. That evening, as I lay beside Dave, I attuned myself to the gentle cadence of his breath. I once found solace in that. It now served as a poignant reminder of all the words left unspoken. Saturday arrived, bringing with it warm sunlight and the gentle buzz of summer in the atmosphere. Dave departed ahead of schedule. He had committed to assisting a neighbor with moving some furniture. I lingered on the steps, clad in my robe, savoring my coffee, when the unmistakable crunch of gravel reached my ears. The truck belonging to Ron. My breath was momentarily halted. He emerged gradually, cradling a small brown box in his arms. "Good morning," he remarked, raising it aloft. "I have brought you something." I arched an eyebrow. "What is it this time? Is that a pie? Considering a new porch swing?" He let out a soft chuckle. Nearly. This is a vintage radio. It was a possession of my father. I made some adjustments, thinking you would appreciate the authenticity of something genuine while you relax out here. He presented it to me, and I glided my fingers across the smooth surface of the polished wood. It appeared aged yet well maintained. Adored. He refrained from disrupting the silence. He allowed it to breathe. However, his voice emerged softly and intimately. Would you be interested in doing so? I gazed at him, taken aback. Is this the location? He rose to his feet and offered his hand. No one is observing except for the trees. For just a fleeting moment, I paused before allowing my hand to meet his. He exuded warmth and steadiness, and as he gently lifted me, a transformation occurred within me. Our movement was minimal, gently swaying, barefoot on the porch. The music envelops us like a soft haze. I gently laid my hand on his shoulder, while he positioned his palm at the small of my back. I experienced, retained, not in a romantic sense, not precisely. It was either greater than that or perhaps lesser. It was an undeniable presence. It was a moment when I felt entirely seen by someone. As the final notes of the song faded away, silence enveloped us. We exchanged glances. A subtle connection emerged between us, gentle and profound, yet entirely unvoiced. Not desire, not betrayal. Two individuals find themselves in a serene moment of mutual comprehension, awakening to the deep longing they had for genuine connection. He released my hand. I should go, he reiterated, just as he had before. However, on this occasion, his voice carried a greater weight. I did not request his presence to remain, yet I expressed my gratitude by saying thank you. He smiled, yet the warmth did not extend to his eyes on this occasion. As he descended the steps, a significant realization dawned on me. This connection we were developing was not intended to substitute for anyone else. It was not a matter of yearning for additional desires. It was akin to awakening from a slumber I hadn't realized I had entered. Once he had driven away, I remained seated on the porch for an extended period, attuned to the radio's static as it ebbed and flowed with the breeze. The boards had fallen silent, yet within me, a transformation was occurring, breaking free like the initial green shoot of spring. I was uncertain of what might emerge from it, yet I was prepared to discover the outcome. After that, I didn't see Ron for a week, not due to any avoidance on his part. I find it hard to accept that this was the reality, yet life, in its serene and expected manner, gently ushered us back to our respective corners. Dave spent more time at home. He observed the new radio on the porch and inquired about its origin. I mentioned that Ron gave it to me. He took a momentary pause, his gaze scarcely lifting from the mail he was meticulously sorting. That was very kind of him. That was the conclusion. No additional inquiries. No raised eyebrows. It was merely the same distant acknowledgement that had become a familiar aspect of our home. A few days later, Dave pleasantly surprised me with a suggestion to go out to dinner, an activity we hadn't indulged in for months. We found ourselves seated opposite one another in a softly illuminated booth at the classic steakhouse along Route 9. enjoying our coffee while engaging in conversation about topics such as the weather, lawn maintenance, and the state of the dishwasher, which seemed to be nearing the end of its service life. It was neither unpleasant nor remarkable, simply average. At one moment, I glanced around the restaurant and noticed a couple, perhaps our age or slightly younger, seated 2 tables away. They clasped hands across the table, sharing soft laughter, immersed in their own realm. I once observed couples like that and experienced a sense of envy. On that particular night, I found myself devoid of envy. I simply experienced conscious of the significant differences that existed, conscious of the subtle shift that had occurred between Dave and me, not marked by drama or tragedy, but rather by a gradual fading of awareness, of genuine perception. As we arrived that evening and came to a stop in the driveway, Dave switched off the ignition, yet remained seated, not making any move to exit the vehicle. "You've appeared more reserved lately, my deed," he remarked. I cast a brief look in his direction. "Have I?" He gave a nod. "It seems as though your thoughts are elsewhere." I did not reply immediately. Ultimately, I concluded, perhaps I am simply engaging in deeper contemplation. He gazed at me then, truly gazed. And there was a glimmer of something I hadn't encountered in years, perhaps a sense of concern, a touch of confusion, and a hint of guilt. "I don't want to lose you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, not to brush him off, but because it was the first genuinely sincere thing he had expressed to me in quite some time. I whispered that we haven't, yet we've lost fragments of ourselves, and perhaps it's time to rediscover them. That night, I lay in bed with my back turned to him, yet my heart felt an undeniable closeness. A subtle shift had occurred, not in its entirety, but sufficiently to be felt. 2 days later, I found myself once more on the porch, absorbing the gentle hum of the radio, when Ron's truck made its way slowly down our drive. He did not exit immediately. Upon his arrival, he approached with a carefully wrapped parcel, secured with twine. "I thought it was only right to give you a proper farewell," he stated. I stood there, my heart simultaneously sinking and soaring. "Farewell?" He gave a nod. I made the decision to take some time off to visit my brother in Tennessee, a trip I had been postponing for years. I was at a loss for words. A part of me wished to request his presence to linger, while another part acknowledged the reasons compelling him to depart. "I express my pleasure at your arrival." He presented the parcel to me. "This is a compilation of poems from my wife's collection. On rainy Sundays, she would read them to me." I grasped it firmly with both hands. The twine softened from his frequent handling. "Are you certain you wish to let it go?" He acknowledged with a nod. She was revisiting them, much like one would when familiar with another's presence. A moment of stillness. He then remarked, "Karen, I'm uncertain about what this was between us. I hesitate to label it in a way that might diminish its significance, yet it held great importance for me." Tears brimmed at the corners of my eyes, not from sorrow nor from yearning, but from a profound sense of gratitude. "It was significant to me as well," I remarked. We remained in silence once more, the sort that required no embellishment. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from my cheek, and leaned in, not for a kiss, nor for anything beyond that moment, just long enough for our foreheads to meet. It was the most tender farewell I have ever experienced. And then he vanished. Time went by. Dave and I have resumed our leisurely strolls around the block, taking our time and savoring each moment. We engaged in a deeper conversation, reflecting on how we had become accustomed to drifting and contemplating the possibility of gradually rowing back to shore. On certain evenings, as the warmth envelops the air and the cicadas begin their serenade, I find myself seated on the porch, the radio softly humming beside me, with a book of poems resting open in my lap. I do not read them all in one sitting. I prefer to address them individually. There are moments when I reflect on Ron, and how he recognized me during a period when I was unaware of my own need for recognition. He did not come to my aid. He did not take me away. What he provided was more compact, subdued, and significantly more powerful. He brought to my attention that I remained present. She remains a woman whose heart beats with a resonance that cannot be ignored. Still a person deserving of a dance, even if it's just once on a Thursday afternoon, accompanied only by the whisper of the wind. In this process, he guided me on a journey of self-discovery, allowing me to reconnect not only with my true self, but also with the man I have shared my life with throughout the years. Not every narrative requires a climactic conclusion. Some simply require you to remain a bit more receptive than you were previously. That is more than sufficient.